What's up everyone, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the home building series. In this part, we're gonna go over all the utilities. The utilities are the homeowner's responsibility to get hooked up, while Wayne Homes or whoever you choose to go with will construct your house and run everything inside. You're still responsible for working with the contractors for the outside. So we're gonna go over well, septic, propane, electric, and internet today. We're gonna go through cost, options of installation, and a little bit of how they work. First thing we're going to cover is gas, and you might not have that in your house at all. I know several houses that are all electric. We didn't want to go all electric primarily because my house now is all electric and the electric bill is very high in the winter time and it's high in the summertime as well. And another thing is I like gas cooking. So you can't have gas cooking without a gas hookup. So there's oil, there's natural gas, and then there's propane. Natural gas isn't available here, and from what I've heard, oil is a little bit dirtier if you also use it to heat your house. So that leaves us with propane. And then options for propane are either above ground or below ground. Now for above ground and below ground, this is just a preference on what you want to see. For above ground options, it's cheaper because you don't have to dig the hole, you don't have to backfill. There's a lot of steps you just don't have to do. But if you don't have somewhere to hide that tank, you'll be able to see that tank when somebody's looking at your house. We chose the below ground option, which leaves you a little black covering up above so you can still access the tank, you can access the shutoff, and they can refill it, but it's out of sight and you have much smaller footprint sticking up from the ground. So you'll get a tank installed. You could choose tank size. The options given to us were 500 or 1,000. We wanted the option to go with a whole home generator ran off propane if we want to install it later. So we went with the 1,000-gallon tank. This also means we'll be able to go longer between filling it up. Now, as we talked about in this house, we're going to run the furnace off propane and we're going to also run the appliances off propane. This covers a gas cooktop, we can hook up a gas dryer, and we also have the gas ran out to the back of the house for when we build a porch with the intentions of building an outdoor kitchen. Now, as far as the process for installing a propane tank, if it's above ground, they're just going to set it on a level surface. If it's below ground, you need to have a 10 by 6 foot hole dug. They'll backfill some of it with sand. They'll drop the tank down. They'll backfill the rest of it with sand, and you'll be left with a little black cover where you can access it. They'll also have to trench to the house to lay the propane line. This will be backfilled with sand and then dirt on top of it. It was recommended to us to keep the propane tank about 100 foot from the home, and this is because then you can drive around the home and not worry about driving on the propane tank. If you need to drive a tractor around, it's easier having it a little bit farther away. Coming into the house, this is where the propane comes in. Running from the underground tank to the underground piping, comes in the house right here, and this is where it goes to the rest of the house. There's no shutoff inside the house, the shutoff is at the tank. Next up, we're going to talk about the well. So the first step of the well is somebody coming out and witching for water. So what that means is you walk around with 2 sticks above the ground and they find where the best location to drill down and try and get water is. You're never guaranteed to hit water with a well. They do caution you beforehand. They might have to dig several wells, although the people I worked with, they told me that yes, they have to disclose that, but in the last 30 wells they dug, they never had to dig a second well. Whether you have to dig a second well or not depends on how much water your well will produce and how fast. This is measured in gallons per minute. Ours is about 2.5 gallons a minute, and with the size of the house and our family, that should be good. If that is ever not good, we can put a secondary storage tank so it'll pump from the ground to the storage tank, a large storage tank that will then pump from the storage tank to our house, so we never run out of water. If the whole family is showering, we also have to water the grass, but it's something that we'll move into the house, get a feel for, and if we need it, add later. Now, when putting in a well, there were 2 options given to us. There's actually 3 options that I know of. Hand digging it, which no one does anymore. Driven, which means you pick a spike up in the air and smash it into the ground, breaking the rocks to create a hole. And then drilled, which is basically a big drill bit that will drill through the earth. The people we went with recommended driven over drilled because drilled will give you a nice clean hole, but as you smash down through the driven way, it'll break up the rocks around it, letting more water come in and fill up that hole. For the driven method, I think it took about 5 to 7 days of them being out here to get all the way down to where they need to be. There is no prescribed depth for how far down you need to go. It is all based on that gallons per minute we talked about. Once the well is in place, they will also need to trench to run a water line to the house. They also need to run electric lines from the well to the house. I have 2 run for me because we have a pump pumping the water out of the well, and then we ran another dead line. If we ever need to put a storage tank in, we can connect that dead line without having to retrench so that we can utilize that storage tank. Well, this is what it looks like inside of the house from the well. So this is where the water line comes in. This is also where the electric lines come in. They run through, and this is called a bladder. A bladder is the temporary storage from your water, so it pumps it out to the well into your bladder. The bladder supplies the rest of the house, so this is also running to the hot water heater, which splits off a cold and a hot line. But this is the main storage for your house besides the well. The well will store water because it'll get a gallon per minute and it has a certain capacity that it can store. And then as this empties out, it'll pump more in. To control that pump, we have this. This also controls a lot of other things, such as if we run out of water or it gets dry, then it'll shut off and it'll resume a half an hour later. So a lot of safety features as well with this. The options you have when choosing a tank are different sizes. I think the two options given to me were a 30 gallon or an 80 gallon. We went with the 80 gallon just because you go with the 80 gallon or even 30 gallon, you don't get that much water. There's a bladder in here that separates the air from the water, so you get about half of that full of water. So we have 40 gallons worth of water in our bladder. The next thing we're going to talk about is septic, and septic is actually one of the first steps to building a home that lets you kick off building the home, which is the perk test that we talked about in previous videos. You can find more information if you go back to the beginning of this series. So the perk test is a test to see what kind of septic system you need, and that's all based on the residue of the septic system draining into the ground. There are various different types of septic systems. We went with an at-grade bed, which means we don't need a sand mound. I've seen a bunch of people that needed a sand mound, so that means you lay your septic system, you put a large mound of sand, and then you put dirt over top of it so it can drain through the soil and further filter the waste. Since ours is an at-grade septic system, it goes through a couple different chambers where the waste lays in. There's an aerator in the next one and a filter in the next one. The water coming out of there is sanitary, so as it drains back through the ground and gets into the groundwater, it'll be clean and won't affect anything. Installing the septic system is a multi-step process. Now, because there are so many different septic systems, I'm not going to go through the exact steps of how this specific one was installed, but it's pretty much pass the perk test, get somebody out here to install it, inspect the installation, cover it up, trench to the house, lay the piping to go out to the septic, and run the electric back to the house. So this is where everything is going to come in the house for the septic system. It has the pump, it has the aerator, because the at-grade system has an aerator to help break down that hard matter. And it also has the alarm, which if the aerator ever goes bad, if anything throws, the alarm will sound. They're on separate circuits, so if this goes off and this blows the circuit, this will still have power, so it can let you know something is wrong. The last thing we're going to talk about, and we're going to talk about them together, is Comcast and electric. So internet and electric, we went with Comcast. If you go with something like HughesNet, then you won't have these steps because it's all satellite, but we wanted actual wired connection because it's more resilient and faster. All this starts with an inspection from your internet provider and an inspection from your electric provider that will tell you where the transformer or where you need to trench from the road to your house so that they can lay the cable. Once past that step, you can open up a trench, whether you do it yourself or an excavator. You can lay conduit down for the electric, which the wire will be fed through. Comcast lays their own conduit, so we didn't need to put separate conduit for them. Once the conduit is down, you'll get an inspection, making sure everything is good. You can cover back up the hole. Your electric provider will come out, pull the cable through the conduit. They'll also put a transformer if you need one, and then they'll wire everything up. The last step being putting the meter on the outside of your house and running the electric from the road to the transformer through the wire in the conduit to your house, to a meter, and then into your breaker box. And that will complete your electric setup. Comcast is very similar. They have not a transformer, but a tap where you can tap into their cable. They will run it from the house. They will run it into the house, into your modem. Over here is where electric comes in. It comes in behind the box and ties directly into the box. You do have a main shutoff at your electric breaker box, and then this distributes all the electric to the rest of the house, the other breaker boxes, anywhere else you need it to go. The responsibility of the electric company ends at hooking it into the meter, and then the construction company that is constructing your house will take over the rest. All right, let's go over costs. So we're going to go from the least expensive to the most expensive. expensive, and we're going to cover the 5 utilities we talked about today. So first up is Comcast. So Comcast, we had a 1,000-foot trench. The trench needs to be 6 inches wide, 18 inches deep. For this, we rented a trencher. We also supplied 2 houses. I'm getting Comcast at mine, and we had to go past another, so they're enabled to get it. The original quote was $15,000 from Comcast. They knocked off $8,000 because we supplied 2 houses, and then because they didn't have to trench and I rented a trencher, they knocked off the rest. So they provide the cable and conduit for free. They just don't do the trenching. If you do the trenching yourself, then it's free, except for the trencher, which we rented for $700. So the cheapest utility was Comcast, coming in at $700. The next utility is electric. So my electric company covered the transformer, the wire, the meter. So what we had to cover was 150-foot trench. It was about 1 foot wide by 3 foot deep, and then the conduit that the wire would be pulled through. The trench was $400 for the digging and backfilling, and the conduit installation, and we needed to get an inspection, was $2,300. So that makes electric come in at $2,700. Next on the list is the well. We have a 200-foot well, and that's determined by the gallon per minute we talked about earlier. I also went with an 80-gallon bladder. You can go with a smaller one and be less expensive, or a bigger one and be more expensive. We had a 150-foot trench between the well and the house, so that brought the total for trenching to $400. The total for everything else that includes the bladder, the supplies, the digging of the well, the casing, the cap, $11,650. So that brings us to a total of $12,050. Close behind it, we have propane. So we opted for a 1,000-gallon tank. You can go smaller, be less expensive. 150-foot trench, and then a 10x6 hole that needed dug to put the propane tank in because we went with underground instead of above ground. The digging the trench, the hole, provide the sand, and backfill was $1,800, and then the tank, the hookups, and its first filling was $10,800. That brings the cost for propane to $12,600. And then by far the most expensive is septic. We had a 100-foot trench from the house to the at-grade bed. And speaking of at-grade bed, the system we went with was a Norweco pre-treatment system. I have no clue what that means, but that let us stay away from a sand mound. For the design and the permit was $400, and then for the actual installation of the septic was $22,500. So that brought the total to around $23,000 for septic. And that brings our grand total to right around $50,000 for all 5 utilities. Now there are going to be other costs for your home as well, including driveway, downspouts, any final grade, any backfilling that's needed. There are a bunch of other things you should account for under your home site allowance, but this goes over the 5 utilities. If you enjoyed this video, a like and a subscribe wouldn't hurt, but either way, it's on to the next project for me.